Looks like we're a small bunch.
We are a small bunch, but if nothing else, we are good content for the webinar. So I'd like to get started. Welcome everyone to our webinar for June, the introduction to the Board of Directors. And I'm thrilled to be able to introduce our board members extraordinaire, Jennifer Lohse of the Tucson Foundations, who is a governance guru. And I'm thrilled that she's able to present on the importance of Board of Directors. And I think that this will be helpful for a lot of folks who are getting started, who might be fiscally sponsored programs right now or only just getting started, to understand what a Board of Director does and why the board is so important to the success of your diaper bank. So without further ado, I'll turn this over to Jennifer.
Thanks, Allison. I don't know about board member and governance guru, but certainly the board member part is true, and I am the chair of the governance committee for the National Diaper Bank Network. I also have chaired several governance committees, and so I happen to be one of those weird people who really enjoys the work of building boards and talking about building boards, and I spend a great deal of my professional career doing that work as well. So I am just honored to be included and have been asked to do this presentation and the one on Thursday, which will be equally as exciting, at least in my mind. So if you have questions along the way, go ahead and do that little chat thing where you raise your hand, and I should be able to see that. And I'll be able to take those questions as you're asking them. But we'll certainly have time at the end as well for questions and answers. Okay, so we're going to talk about some of the legal requirements of why we need a board, what the corporate mandates are, what some of those legal definitions are, some of the standards, the basic responsibilities of a board, who runs the board, the size of the board and how that might vary. What does it take to get started and really build your board? What do you do once you're up and running? What are the service expectations for board members? How do you grow once you've gotten started? Tips specific to diaper banks. We have a few of those that we've learned over the years. What are the basics that you want in your board members, and what does the board member need themselves to be successful? And then we've got a few resources available to you as well. Okay, so let's get started with why you need a board. Now, some of this may be all commonplace. Many of you may already have a pretty decent understanding of why you need a board. But first and foremost, because it's a requirement legally, you must have one in order to be a nonprofit organization. You have to have a board of governors. That language may be different in different places. It could be a board of trustees, board of governors. Most commonly, it's just referred to as the board. In order to have a board, you need one to qualify for nonprofit status. You need to shape the organization with your board. They're the people that kind of help set the tone and direction for who you are, and they're also the people who are legally required to do so. They are also the ones who hold on to the ethics for your organization and set the tone of good practice. So we have a few corporate mandates, first at the federal level. For boards, once you're up and running or once you are thinking about becoming an organization, there are certain things that you have to do. And one of the things is of course, starting a board, and here's what that means at this point when you're first getting started. Federally, nonprofit organizations must be tax exempt by the IRS. There's an application to achieve that status, and in that filing of that application, you will identify a couple of your incorporating board members, some of your first board members. Sorry about that. Annually, you're going to have to file an IRS Form 990. Those are requirements on your board. Your board's going to need to do some reviewing of that tax documentation. While you might not be paying taxes, you do file an annual report to the IRS that is then publicly available, depending on your size of your organization, which form you might fill out. at the state level to be a nonprofit, you have to file with your local corporation commission or whatever the equivalent would be. I know in Arizona it's called the Corporation Commission, but I know it's something else in several other states. You may also have requirements as a nonprofit to register as a charity or a fundraising entity. That does vary by state. Sometimes that's through the Secretary of State's office. In other states, that may be through the Corporation Commission again. There may be local requirements on your organizations for filing. There may be requirements for certain types of organizations. And I found that the best way to identify what the legal requirements are is to talk to your big organizations in your area. And if you're rural, big might be the nearest United Way. They would be able to point you in the right direction, if nothing else, as to what legal filing requirements you might have as a nonprofit. So some of the things that are required of boards are certain legal definitions. We have to understand that boards are to act with reasonableness, with prudent behavior, and serving as the fiduciary. And what that all means is that you're going to have your board members behaving in a way that protects the organization as has been entrusted to them by the IRS. You don't pay taxes, and that's the exchange, is that you're going to act in a reasonable and prudent manner. And the prudent person rule, you can Google that and find a much more detailed definition, but really it means that the funds that are in your care are going to be treated with care, and that your role isn't to take risks with their money that would be considered crazy. Let's just say crazy. Fiduciary, you have fiduciary duties as a board member, which means that you're the person with the power and the obligation to act on behalf of the organization, and you must do so with trust, with good faith, and with honesty. All right, so here are the 3 legal guiding standards. You'll hear these a little here, a little there. The first being, you'll hear it from lawyers. Lawyers like to use these terms a lot in the formation. But you really want to incorporate these definitions into your board member orientation, because they really do use a very simplistic language to describe what does it mean, what are my legal obligations as a board member. The first is the duty of care, and that means that you're promising as a board member that you're going to be participating in the decisions of the board. And what does that look like? Well, it means that you're going to be getting your agendas and reading them. You'll be reading all pertinent information that is being sent out to you, that you will be attending meetings, as many as you possibly can, and by laws you may choose to say how many absences that a board member can have within a year and still be considered in good standing. You want to get to a point where folks really want to participate on their board, and if they start to miss too many meetings, they cannot meet that duty of care. And so that's why you see that language popping up now in bylaws. You want to be able to rely on the information that you are receiving, which means that the staff, the attorneys, the officers, and the board committee are all using relevant and correct information. That's what duty of care is about, making sure that you have the best information that you possibly can in order to take care of the organization that you are being tasked with caring for. Duty of loyalty. This really comes down to the conflict of interest and the issue of confidentiality. So, and often those two things are considered the same, one and the same, and they're really not. Confidentiality is really about what occurs in your boardroom stays in your boardroom. It shouldn't be parading all over town if you're having a discussion about hiring or firing an executive director, or hiring and firing a consultant to help with strategic planning. Those are all sorts of things that come up really early on in the formation of an organization, and that you want to take care, especially since every community is small within its own community. And so, you know, you may be working with a limited number of consultants, and they may pop up over and over again. So confidentiality isn't just a legal requirement, it's also a best practice. Conflict of interest really has to do with financial conflict. It is about making sure that the person who is making decisions does not have financial gain or incentive in any way, shape, or form. And so there are ways that you'll need to disclose that information. There are templates available on the web. If you Google conflict of interest disclosure statement, there are some great templates available from other organizations. If you can't lay your hands on any of those, I'm sure Allison's got one, or I have several. And it's really about, is there a financial conflict? So example, an executive director who is being paid by an organization would not be able to discuss their own salary. And so that person would have to take a step back from the conversation and basically recuse themselves and leave the room while the remainder of the board discusses that particular issue of salary. Now, it's not supposed, that conversation is not supposed to wander away from that, and once a decision has been made, the conflict has been resolved, and the conversation with that person can be continued. So the third duty is the duty of obedience, and that's about your legal filings, compliance with those filings. That's when you file your 990 annually, your articles of incorporation, your bylaws, and maintaining good status with your corporation commission, whatever your federal, state, and local laws are, really being obedient to that. You'll see that second bullet there under that duty of obedience is the obedience to its purpose. You want to ensure that your organization has set a mission and a vision of who they want to be and what they want to accomplish, and that they don't have what we refer to as mission creep, that they stay focused on those things. And that's a lot easier said than done, and there are some really great examples of mission creep that have been occurring in the last, several years that I think you can get a good sense. An example that we might talk about with the diaper bank is a mission that says we distribute diapers to community partners, and then suddenly, years down the road, you find that your organization is also distributing car seats and baby supplies. That would be mission creep in that mission. That's not to say that you couldn't change that mission, but it is to say that it is worth the discussion because you've committed to being obedient to the mission at hand. So board members have 10 basic responsibilities. They determine the mission and the purpose of the organization. They select the chief executive or executive directors. Some places call them managing directors. They support and evaluate that individual, and if push comes to shove, they also fire them. They ensure effective planning. That includes strategic planning at the highest level. Doesn't necessarily include workplace planning, but that also can be the case. There could be development plans. So that includes kind of all the different plans that could lay claim at that highest level of work. They monitor and strengthen programs and services, and we're going to talk just a little bit later about how they do that without getting into the day-to-day too much. Ensuring adequate financial resources, and that's really about fundraising, and that can happen in a variety of ways. It could also be earned income, maybe charging partner agencies a small fee for administration. There could also be special events in there, fundraising. There's lots of different ways, lots of different models for ensuring adequate financial resources for an organization, and in the diaper banking community, we have a little bit of everything. You have the responsibility of protecting assets and providing proper financial oversight, and there are a variety of ways that that happens, and that is a whole different presentation talking about how you provide proper oversight financially for your organization. It's the board's responsibility to build a competent board. That means recruiting people with the right skills that you need and training them on the skills that they don't have yet. We like to say yet because, you know, I believe personally that all individuals can be trained up to a high level of competence. It's all about assessing their motivation as whether they're interested in getting to that level or not. They also have the responsibility of those legal and ethical integrity pieces, making sure that everything is protected and cared for, and enhancing the organization's public standing. And that's really where you practically wear a name badge that says Diaper Bank on you at all time, and when people ask you, you talk about the critical work that you're doing in your community. That is really about building who you are as an organization, getting in front of the right people and talking to them about the work of the Diaper Bank. Board leadership. Board officers can consist of a variety of different positions, and some are dictated at the state level as to the positions that you must have. And the language may be slightly different depending on the state as well. So board officers typically consist of a chair or president, a vice chair, potentially a chair-elect, secretary and a treasurer. You could also have secretary-elect and treasurer-elect. You see the elect positions more commonly of boards who are a little bit further down the road than others, and typically those are boards that have 15 or more people to them. The smaller the board, the fewer the officer positions that you have, and the less likely you are to have many committees. You'll have much smaller leadership. I think currently the National Diaper Bank Network has a chair, a secretary, and a treasurer. So very small officers group. The board size is dictated, the minimum at least, is dictated by state. You're going to want to look at your corporation statutes in your state and identify that number. In the state of Arizona, it's 3. I believe the same is true for Connecticut, that they're 3 as well. And that will determine your minimum number. Now, I don't know any organization that has really thrived under just having 3 board members. You simply can't get the work done that you need to in order to truly meet your mission, and that is you need more and more people to do that work. There are also maximum sets. Maximums for boards may be set in your own bylaws. And several years ago, there was a push to eliminate large boards of 30 or more members. And in the last year or so, there's been some really great discussion on what that has done to board governance, and that the ramifications of saying that boards were too large and bringing them down to smaller sizes actually has discouraged good governance practices. Now, I'm not sure that those two things are absolutely causal related, but I think that certainly larger boards have more capacity, but they also have a difficult time making quorum. And so for a grassroots organization, something homegrown, you know, you can be anywhere from 9 to 15 and feel pretty comfortable and not experience board burnout in the same way that you would if, say, you only had 5 or 6 members. So those are all things to take into consideration, how much work you have to get done in a day, and how much you want your board members to be involved in that daily work. So you want to make sure that you describe how many is too many for your organization, and that changes over the years as you revise your bylaws. So pick the size that makes sense given where you're at in your organization, or adjust your bylaws according to where you're at today. Optimal board sizes definitely vary depending on the workload. So as you get started in building your board, the first board is usually formed by the founder, the person who is saying, this is my organization, I got it turned into a nonprofit, and I'm the one distributing diapers out of my garage, and I want to make sure that this thing grows because I believe in the work and I don't want it to live in my garage forever. So board members will participate in the development of strategic planning and strategic issues thinking with the founders. So typically that's the founder's spouse, sister, brother, neighbors, whoever else is really connected with the issues. We have lots of diaper banks that have been formed in that way. Over time, those start to transition and people step off and you start to get heads of partner organizations and things like that. You're going to elect your officers to meet that basic minimum requirement as stated in your state. You're going to make sure you assign duties for everyone. It is a volunteer management must to have very clear roles and responsibilities for every individual. That way you know what the expectations are. You're going to finalize the name and the legal address of the organization. You're going to incorporate the organization, and then you're going to develop your bylaws, your mission, your vision, the ethical guidelines and code of conduct. There's some great templates out there available for all of this stuff, including, I believe NDBN has quite a bit of this information in the technical guide on getting started as a diaper bank, which I believe is linked at the end of this presentation so that you have the exact address. So once you're up and running, once you've got all of your filings done, what does the board do? What does this initial board do, or what do they do over the next couple of years? Well, they're going to build and evaluate programs. Do we want to give diapers to individuals, or do we want to give them to partner organizations? And if we're giving them to partner organizations, what are the criteria that we're going to be doing, that we're going to be using to evaluate our success? Now, National Diaper Bank Network has been instrumental in getting us all on the same page. About 5-6 years ago when we all first started coming together, the only thing we agreed on at the time was that one diaper equaled one diaper, and that was still a little bit of a debate, but we all came to a consensus that we could agree on that particular issue. So the up and running board is going to define your vision, your mission, and your values. There's some great value exercises out there that will really help you identify what is important in your organization. And you know what? It is different for every diaper bank. One diaper bank may think stewardship of donor dollars is the most important thing in that organization, which, you know, that's a fiduciary responsibility, but they feel it's so important that they're going to turn that into a value. They value stewardship. When you're choosing your vision and your mission, the vision is what does the world look like if we solve the problem, and the mission is what are we doing to solve the problem. So your vision may be a world where no diaper need exists, or a community where no diaper need exists, and your mission may be distributing diapers to those in need. This board is probably going to be running your initial operations, and you know that can take anywhere from 6 months to 10 years. I don't know that I've ever seen a startup board after 10 years kind of still doing the operational work. They may exist. I don't believe that I've seen that. So that would be your outside number. So if everybody can get moved to, you know, a full governance board by year 10, I think we're all doing splendidly. This up and running board is going to do fundraising, and there's all kinds of tips and tricks to get folks comfortable with asking for money. But this first board is going to be more knowledgeable about the cause than any subsequent board. They're going to feel the mission in a way, having all those diapers, having been there in the beginning, having built all these plans. They're going to do the best fundraising. They're going to lay the best groundwork. Managing the assets of the organization, that again goes to those finances, making sure that you're reviewing transactions, that you're providing appropriate reports, that you understand what your obligations are financially, ensuring all of those legal and ethical integrity issues are in place, representing the stakeholders to the community. Who are your stakeholders? You should probably have something that defines who are your stakeholders for your organizations. Most organizations will define them as clients, donors, staff, volunteers. I'm missing one. There's 5 of them. It may be vendors. I think it's vendors. Or partners. That could be a both. Providing continuity. Nothing worse than someone who's created a beautiful organization and created a passion, built up some support in the community, and then that person has to move, and the board wasn't ready for that person to move, and they just aren't prepared to take over the whole operation. So boards build continuity over time by building plans. They evaluate the relevance of a program. They don't necessarily evaluate the success of the program, but they evaluate, hey, are we duplicating services in this community? Is what we really need to be doing providing diapers directly to individuals, or should we be doing it through partner agencies? What are the criteria we're going to use to evaluate the program? Should we be serving people that are 100% below the poverty line, 200% over the poverty line? Those are the sorts of things that evaluation means at the highest level for program evaluation. Who are we really serving here, and how are we evaluating that information? And then last, the board, the up and running board, once you get going, it's all about building the brand. I heard somebody give an elevator speech the other day that they were talking about training your board to do elevator speeches, and they said, quite frankly, the best pitch you can give for any organization is by saying, you know, most people ask the question, hi, I'm so-and-so, what do you do? Well, instead of answering, you know, I'm a CPA, the answer is, well, I am a CPA by day, but what I'm really passionate about is my work with this diaper bank. And what I really have found my heart and soul, you know, doing lately is packing and distributing diapers. And that way the elevator speech kind of fits automatically with whatever the person's interest is in that organization. What are the board service expectations for each person? We expect that board members are going to be preparing for and attending board meetings. You know, I like to believe that not every board member is going to read every piece of material in advance of the meeting, so I kind of plan for that. When I'm the president of a board, I like to send out these little nagging emails in advance that say, oh, Jeff, I just love, you know, what you contribute to our board meeting. Have you had a chance to look at the board material? I had a question about this, and I really feel like you could answer that maybe before the meeting to help me as president prepare better to have this conversation with the full board next week. If you send out those types of little emails, you'd be surprised at how quickly those emails can go out and how responsive your board will be. So there are great ways to build up that attendance. But you will have folks that just need to step off your board at some point. And knowing what your investment into that board member is, and when it's time to let that person go, we like to call that a bless and release. We expect that board members will serve on a board committee or a board task force, at least one, if not multiple. And there are a variety of board committees. I'm going to talk a lot further about board committees and how you really get into governance with committees. And so we're going to talk about that on Thursday. You talk about board member giving. How much do you want from them financially? Do you want them to write a check personally, or can they give through just their business? Do you need it from both? If somebody is representing a corporation in your community, is that held by the individual, or is it held by the corporation, and it's that person, whoever holds that position going forward? What are the term limits? Is it 1 year? Is it 3 years? Is it no term limits? Founding boards don't usually put term limits on the organization because it takes a while to get up and running, and it's very hard to anticipate when that occurs. And so you might not have term limits, but it's something to think about where you might like to be. There is a resource available through BoardSource. They annually do a report called the Board Governance Index. It gives you an outline of the best practices of boards nationally. They interview thousands and thousands of boards to get a sense of how long do they meet, how often do they meet, what are the term limits, what are the titles of the officers. That's all some really helpful information when you're kind of deciding who you want to be long term. Next steps for growing your board, once you kind of have a feel for who you are as an organization and who the leadership's going to be, you're going to want to develop a governance committee. So by this point, you've probably already got a finance committee, maybe an audit committee if you have received some grant that requires that. You may have a program committee. There could be a variety of committees. But you really want to develop a governance and nominating committee. If you're big enough that you can separate those two things out, more power to you. I serve on all kinds of boards, on all kinds of sizes, and I'm still waiting to see those two things separate independently and operate independently. I really enjoy when they're together. It seems to work really well. So what that committee does is they develop your board recruitment plan, and you want to match that recruitment plan to the terms on your board. So if you have a 3-year term, you want your plan to recruit for the next 3 years, and that's a rolling 3 years. It will never just be 1 year that you're recruiting. Building recruitment for 1 year at a time may not give you a full picture on where you need to be. You really do. It takes time to recruit folks. Maybe they're on another board. Maybe they have some financial obligation to another organization. Maybe they have a personal obligation in their life that they're waiting to finish up with, you know, some new baby that's been born in the household. You know, I don't feel like I can handle it this year, but maybe next year after she's walking or something. Create other committees and task forces that fit within your strategic plan. You can identify ways to recruit people for those committees and task forces. It really gives a way to do recruitment in the best way possible. Tips specific for diaper banks. So first, you're going to want to identify the professional skills needed. There's going to be stuff like logistics. You know, how do you get diapers in and out? What kind of vendors do we need to hire? What trucking companies are there available? Are we going to ask the agencies and the individuals to come pick up their diapers on their own, in which case we're going to need warehouse space, which means you probably need a real estate agent on your board to make sure that you're renting space at a reasonable price. That's assuming that you're not getting it donated or running it in your garage. If you don't want it to be in your garage forever or your living room, you may want to bring that person onto your board, that real estate agent, a little bit sooner. They can help you identify. They may have clients that are looking to donate space. There's an organization that I've been working with the last couple of years that we've been helping to find a permanent home. In the meantime, they were able to identify a local business person who had a facility available that would meet their needs minimally, and all they asked for payment was $1 a year so that they could say that the place was rented. And that was a win-win for both the entrepreneur and the organization, because the organization, of course, was able to benefit tremendously by having those 3 years to get their feet on the ground, but they took advantage of that 3 years and kind of looked at who they wanted to be 3 years later. And so they now are in their own facility, but that's taken a few years to plan for that. You want to define your commitment requirements. How much time do you want from board members? What talents do you need from them? And what's their treasure commitment? How much financially are they going to do? Even on a national board, my recommendation is that you use the language something like, our expectation is that every board member will give to the best of their ability, or will commit to a stretch gift as a leader in this organization. There's all kinds of great ways to say it without giving a defined number. Arts organizations, long-standing organizations, very large organizations, hospitals, they all have very specific numbers. Something that you may want to consider, I did a training recently on next generation involvement, and one of the things we talked about was those under the age of 40 and those over the age of 40 may have very different giving capacities. You may get more time out of younger members, but you're certainly going to get a little less treasure. But if you start that relationship building now, 20 years from now, that person's going to be in a different place. And so planning for that succession and to admit to yourself that this problem isn't going away overnight and that you're going to be there for a long time, there's a lot of work to get done here, and these board members have a really important role to play. You're going to want to recruit from the 3 Ds, your donors, your doers, and your door openers. Your doers often come from local partner organizations. They come from family and friends. Your door openers might not be willing to serve on your board, but they are surely willing to refer their friends. They will not nominate themselves to a board, but they will almost always refer you to a friend of theirs who might be interested. I find that's one of the best recruiting tools is the door opening piece and really scheduling out years in advance. You know, every community has a board member who serves on 4 or 5 boards, and they're considered kind of your go-to guy or gal in your community. That person knows everyone else who wants to be on a board. They're not placing them on boards. It's your job to go run them down. Donors, look to who's giving you the support financially and talk to them about either serving on your board or about who they might know with the skill sets that you're seeking. Look to similar size and scope organizations. When I'm doing recruitment, I like to talk to boards that are doing really well in the community and find out what their term limits are and when their folks are expiring, and then I steal them. I find that that is an effective partnership relationship is to have that discussion. So, for example, the Diaper Bank in Arizona also services adult diapers, and so there's an adult organization locally who has been struggling with finding younger board members, and the Diaper Bank here has been struggling to find older board members. So they actually have started some board swapping. So as somebody turns off of one, they recommend them to the next organization. They're only in those first early years, but planning years in advance for that is really critical. Your partner organizations might have individuals that to serve on your committees or on your board at large. One that I would recommend would be finding somebody who does fundraising. Now, they'll have a direct conflict of interest because they can't fundraise for both organizations, or actually that's considered a conflict of loyalty. It's not a financial conflict, it's a conflict of loyalty. But that individual might be interested in serving on your board and kind of helping set your fundraising plan for your organization. They may be willing to open doors for you. In fact, I was shocked at how well that model has worked in our community, and so we've been taking that out into the public to talk to other organizations and to give a lot more transparency in that process of building fundraising plans together and doing fundraising with partner organizations. So the basics that you want in any board member who's going to join your board is that you want to make sure that they don't have a conflict of interest, that they aren't being paid by your organization at the same time they are controlling who gets the contracts, if that makes sense. You want to make sure that the member fits into the strategic plan, whatever their skill set is. If you bring on a CPA, but you already have 3 CPAs on your board, that might be too many CPAs. If you have someone who's interested in, who comes from the real estate sector, but you don't have any need for warehousing or spacing issues, that might not also be timed right. However, those folks might have an interest in sharing other skill sets. CPAs don't always want to be in charge of being your treasurer. Sometimes they want to actually schlep diapers around, and that may or may not be a role on your board in those early years. In order to be an effective fundraising organization, you need to ensure that 100% of your board is giving financially. And so that has to be a very clear expectation up front. There are lots of ways to address it in a very minimal fashion. One of the ways that our diaper bank had established that early on was to ask all board members to bring all of their loose change in from their cars and their homes at every board meeting. And I'll be darned, they raised several $100s every single year just on asking folks to empty their change. Every board member must understand what the responsibilities and the roles are of being a board member. They must understand the finances. That stuff is not optional. They must have a commitment to the cause. Whatever your mission is, they have to be set on that. You need to be very clear if you have an opportunity to be changing your mission, or if that will be coming in the next 3 years, if it's something you are willing to consider as a board. If you are not, be sure that the person aligns with where you are currently, because nothing good will come of someone who wants to shut your organization down and you didn't know that. And then a commitment to professionalism. We are all in this for the greater good, being kind to each other during meetings. Never at a diaper bank meeting have I seen things come to blows, but I have in other boards, and that is not the way that we want to run an organization. We want to be at a point where we feel comfortable being transparent and having conversations openly. There are all kinds of uncomfortable conversations that come at the board level, but if you have got good plans and good people and enough good people involved in the process and can keep everyone focused on where you're all going together, you'll be able to meet that commitment to professionalism. What the board needs. They're going to need clear, intelligible, accurate, and timely financial reports. They're going to need defined roles and responsibilities. They need a strategic plan. They may be developing, they may be part of that initial team that's going to create that strategic plan. They need to be oriented to your board, and they need to receive education and training. They need to have an understanding of what their roles are, and if this is the first board they've ever served on, this training here is a great first step to get your feet wet. There are many, many more trainings online that people can take if time is of the essence. There are some inexpensive ones. I'm a huge fan of Board Sources, 10 Basic Responsibilities series. There's also some other board books in there that I think are great, really training and educating your board. Once you've gotten started, there's all kinds of different things that different board members will need to become trained in. And I think finances, of course, are probably the most critical of those. Understanding your 990 form. When you have less than $50,000 in gross receipts in a year of income and expenses, you are filing a postcard. You are not filing a report. Nobody's really looking at what you're doing. However, you intend to grow down the road, you're really going to want to make sure that you set your financial structure up now in a way that you can do that easily down the road. And so there's some really easy steps to make sure that that happens and that you're trained up. And one of the ways to do that is by having a finance committee that has a chief financial officer from one of your partner organizations serving on that committee. They will help you set out your chart of accounts. They will help you define where software can come from. All of those things, they will help with training. Taking your board orientation and really getting into the weeds on what are you telling people about your organization. What else does the board member need to know? They need to know where money comes from and where it goes in your organization. And that, varies by size as to how detailed you get. It could be 1 slide, it could be 30 slides. I think there's a nice healthy balance someplace right in there. So some of the resources that are available to you, the National Diaper Bank Network, of course, has around 150 diaper banks, I believe, or diaper banking programs across the country. And so one of the first things that they did is kind of pull all those best practices together. So there are 2 how to start a diaper bank webinar that's already posted, and so you want to start a diaper bank, and then there's some technical stuff on the website as well. And I believe that most of you are very active in the Leaders Forum and very aware of what those resources are through NDBN. Board Source. If you have not been to Board Source, it's an incredible site, an incredible organization. They have consultants available. They help with all planning, and they get some great reports on there. They have a ton of free stuff, whether you have a membership or not. You may want to talk to one of your partner agencies to see if they already have some of those documents available that they'd be willing to loan you. So I think that our diaper bank did not have a Board Source membership for many, many years. However, we did have a partnership with an organization who had already bought for their board a series of board governance books. So we borrowed those, we pulled all of their templates and bylaws and policies, and started using all of their things as well. Free Management Library is a great place to go for templates. They just have a ton of templates on there. They also have some articles about best practices and such as well. Oh, look at that. Here's a slide I didn't know was here. Oh, those sneaky people. Okay, so in conclusion, the key to a vital organization is the development of an effective board. And building that board is the commitment of the entire organization, and it's important to acknowledge really early on that you've started a diaper bank in your community because there is a need in your community, and that need exists whether you yourself are involved in it or not, and you owe it to your community to build an organization that is thinking strategically and is sustainable and really making an impact. And so one of the ways that you do that is certainly through meeting your legal and ethical requirements and building a board of governors who are really going to think long-term about the sustainability. Plus, no one wants to really do this work on their own. You think you do until about, year two. I heard from Joanne that, once you've had those diapers in your living room taking up your life, that you really do get ready pretty quickly to find a more sustainable model. Living rooms are not sustainable. All right, questions and answers. Or how about just questions, and we'll see if I've got answers.
Jennifer, that was great. Often people I've seen the term independent board referred to in grants and fundraising documents. Could you explain what is meant by an independent board?
Independent boards have addressed that conflict of interest. That's all that language is using, that it does not have a conflict of interest and that there are no financial ties to another organization. I believe they call those related entities. For example, a foundation board for a hospital is a related entity to the hospital. So in our early years, the Diaper Bank of Southern Arizona was not an independent board, it was an advisory board as it was building under the fiduciary sponsorship or the fiscal sponsorship of another organization. So that was not an independent board. An independent board is an independent organization.
Great, thanks. Yep. Does anybody else have any questions?
Can I ask, this is Anne McBroom from A Small Hand. I was really interested in your explanation of conflict of interest and wondered how you see that in terms of involving clients on your board.
Ooh, that's a good question. Involving clients on your board. That is certainly a trend. It was a trend about 20 years ago to really involve, they called them second chance board members for a long time, and then government entities started to pick up on that language and they started requiring it. If you were going to receive government funding, that you would put clients on your board. They would not have a conflict of interest until they had financial gain from the decision making. So I'll give you an example. If you have clients on your board, so let's use the example of partner organizations. So the Diaper Bank of Southern Arizona does actually have representatives from 2 partner organizations. Anytime there is discussion about whether we'll continue to serve partner agencies or individuals, those 2 individuals must recuse themselves from the conversation because they may receive a financial gain from swaying the conversation towards themselves. But you want to take a lot of care in that because there is perceived conflict of interest and then there's actual conflict of interest, and really making sure that, so for example, a client may steer you towards, so if it's an individual who's receiving diapers from you, they may have an interest in continuing to have individuals being provided diapers. So they wouldn't be able to participate in a conversation if you were going to be thinking about moving towards just partner agencies, for example. But they could participate in a conversation about what the criteria might be for who will receive diapers, even at the individual level, so long as it's broad enough in nature. So when you ask someone to step out of the conversation because of a direct conflict, be clear on that. And, you know, most attorneys will answer that question for you pro bono. They'll take a look at the situation. So you want to have at least an attorney on call that you can ask that question to. I haven't seen a real strong conflict of interest happen with a client in they just don't have the sway. Typically, your board's not big enough for them to be swaying the discussion. Does that make sense? And does it answer your question?
Because on the face of it, I thought maybe they would be excluded from almost any strategic conversation.
No, just anything that they personally
potentially benefit from. And how do you know, handle the issue of their financial contribution?
I love the language that says we expect you to give a gift to the best of your potential.
Okay.
And for some folks, that potential is $1 per year.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Well, thanks. Allison, did you have anything else for me? I believe on Thursday we're going to be talking about transitioning a board from an operating board who moves and counts diapers to a governance board or with long-term sustainable planning in mind. We'll be talking a little bit about committees and how to grow a board at that very large level where maybe it's not so much family and friends, where maybe it's a lot of community leaders, heads of banks, heads of organizations, those sorts of things. So that's going to be Thursday's call.
Jennifer, thank you so much for this presentation, and I'm looking forward to the Thursday presentation as well. And if anyone has any questions they'd like to, have to think about it, let us know, and we'll pass those on to Jennifer. I'll be posting this presentation on our website, and I will send the chart to those who participated or anyone else who wants to a copy. Again, Jennifer, thank you so much for this presentation, and thank you all for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.